If you join the Peace Corps as a volunteer, 3 things are certain. You will get to travel on a unique passport. You'll have a messy, wild adventure, and you'll probably come home speaking a different language.
I was part of the Bassa tribe, so we had to learn conversational Bassa.
But what exactly are these languages? Why must they learn them? And how do they do it? Let's find out.
How many of you who are going to be doctors are willing to spend your days in Ghana, technicians or engineers? How many of you are willing to work in the foreign service and spend your lives traveling around the world?
It came out of the 60s, so it must be all about peace. The Peace Corps is an organization run by the US government. Volunteers get a once-in-a-lifetime leadership experience in developing countries where they work in host communities to do something good.
You have health volunteers, education volunteers. I myself was an agricultural business volunteer.
So it's mainly there for 2 things. One, to provide help for these countries that ask for it, then also it's a diplomacy thing so that these countries like the United States more, essentially.
It all started in the time following the Cold War. JFK, President John F. Kennedy, founded the Peace Corps, and the idea was for Americans to serve their country and the world, to get involved actively in the cause of democracy, peace, development, and freedom. Problem is, the whole world cannot speak English, so they needed to learn languages.
Antonika, Amina Lave Hayastanim.
Katamem Imantanik, Amenashat Bari Antanik.
Yerbek Chem Morana Imantanika.
And today, Peace Corps language training has quite a reputation. How it works is, a country must first invite the Peace Corps, then they decide which countries they can be active in, remembering that the volunteers also need to be safe.
So you can be assigned as an education volunteer, you can be assigned to health, agriculture, community economic development, which is basically business, youth and development, and also environmental.
So that could be working on farms, giving health education, teaching underprivileged kids, doing sports programs, or even giving business training. The main mission is to promote world peace and friendship. And one really cool bonus is the chance to learn a new language and cultural skills. And some of these countries have fascinating languages. So there are 2 options. You can go to a place where you already know the language, or you can go to a place where you have to learn the language. Now, during the first few months on the ground, each volunteer is kind of training themselves. There's all sorts of intensive job training, and picking up the language is going to be really, really important. But it happens in a very natural way, as you're about to hear. So why can't they just speak English and then pick up the most important local phrases? Well, think about it. A volunteer is basically doing a long homestay with complete strangers in a foreign country, often in a pretty rough environment. If that's you, you want the community to like and accept you, and you want to feel safe and confident, or you won't be able to do your job. So the key to fitting in is obvious. Learn their language. And as you're going to see, you don't exactly have a choice in the matter. By the way, if you want to go to a Spanish-speaking country, the Peace Corps advises you to start learning Spanish now, and most volunteers usually recommend getting a head start if you can.
So just because there are so many different people who apply to Peace Corps, they post a lot of the positions as having a language requirement for Spanish or French, just to weed out different people. If you're applying to a country that speaks Spanish or French, it will probably be a good idea to already speak a little bit of those languages.
And my advice, for what it's worth, is to make a habit of reading Spanish or French stories every single day. You're never going to go wrong with stories, as you know.
So for me, when I applied to the Peace Corps, when you apply, you can select your top 3 countries. For me, Moldova wasn't one of my top 3. And then there's a little box below those 3 choices where you can say, add any additional comments. And I said that I would be sent anywhere where I can learn a new language. Because for me, that was something I was very excited about and something that I wanted to do as a volunteer.
At the moment, there are more than 350 Peace Corps languages. I found something quite nice on their website. It's how to say the word peace in a bunch of languages, which gives us a little clue about what the languages are. A single country could teach anything from 1 to 20 languages, but whether it's Chichewa, Albanian, or Romanian, the Peace Corps expects you to learn and work in the local language. So, of course, your amazing new language all depends on which country you go to. I took a look at the volunteer openings, and Spanish proficiency comes up a lot, even for Portuguese countries. For example, Portuguese is the official language of Mozambique, and volunteers will mainly work in Portuguese, so they must learn this before any local languages. But if you already know Spanish, you actually have a better chance of getting into Mozambique, or Say you go to Peru. In Peru, you'll get full-on technical training and hands-on practical experience in Spanish. The volunteers who don't learn Spanish can fall behind in their training and can't complete work in their community. But there are other countries where people speak languages you've probably never even heard of, so that's a very, very different picture. When you arrive in the country, you'll be tested on the language, but it's not that easy to get in because first, you have to be invited.
So about 2 weeks later, I got this email saying I'd been matched to this country of Liberia. I had no idea where that was. I did a quick Google, saw it was in Africa, and I saw I was going to be working as a high school chemistry teacher. So I was like, that is perfect. It's kind of exactly what I wanted. And that I had an interview coming up with it.
So the idea is to serve where you are most needed. And this means that you have to apply, tell them what your best skills are, and then wait to see if they can use you somewhere. But it's not a done deal. The program is highly competitive with a 23% acceptance rate. How that looks is 17,000 applications for fewer than 4,000 positions. And if you get in, they're going to train you for 3 months.
They put a lot of time and effort into you, so they want to make sure you're not going to be impacted by the difference in culture and you're okay being alone, because the isolation is something major, is that you are taken out of your country and put kind of by yourself out there in the middle of nowhere. So they do kind of focus on that aspect of it, is like mentally you're okay with all this stuff that's going to be going on.
So when you first arrive in country, and I'm talking about within the first 2 or 3 days, you will be tested on your language proficiency of the language. So when I first did my language proficiency interview when I got to Nicaragua 2 days into country, I was really, really nervous. And I know I just told you guys not to be nervous about it, but I was just nervous about it because I had grown up as a simultaneous bilingual, and I felt that it would be, I don't know, shameful if I got anything lower than advanced. So I was really nervous, and I had my LPI interview, and luckily I got advanced mid.
So this language proficiency interview Andrea is talking about happens before your service starts, and there's another one at the end of your service. Why? Well, I think you're going to see why, but there's a reason to be really happy about it. You see, the LPI is accredited by the American Council for Teachers of Foreign Languages, which is fantastic because you can put it on your resume at the end. Isn't that awesome?
So it is an interview. It's all speaking and listening. There's no writing, reading, or test questions, I guess. It's just a person asking questions and putting you into a scenario, and then you kind of do role play, and you have to talk your way through a situation, and then they can look and see how well you are at making your new sentences, responding to their questions, and they can gauge your level based on that.
The person who tests you won't be an American. They'll be someone who is native in the language you're testing in, especially trained by the Peace Corps. And based on how you do, they will place you. Should we see how the proficiency levels work? I think we should. They divide them into 4 main categories, from novice to superior, and 3 subcategories of low, middle, and high.
For example, a novice speaker is somebody who has minimal use of the language, maybe can answer a few questions or tell you what a few words mean, but they can't really make their own sentences unless they're memorized. While a superior speaking person can use opinions, speak hypothetically, really use all the different tenses, talk about a story that went on over a long period of time, and make their own sentences based on information that they know about the language, and it really is a lot different than just the memorizing and responding to simple questions that a novice person would speak.
But basically all it is they will have a native speaker who will be likely one of your teachers later on during training. They will just have a conversation with you, and then they're recording the conversation, and then they'll go back and listen to it and then give you a proficiency rating.
And then this grading determines which training town you are sent to, which is cool because your whole group will be the same level as you. Did I mention the tests in the middle of your service? I didn't. My bad. They will keep testing you on this language. It usually happens about 4 times throughout the experience. No, there is no room for fooling around here.
What happens if you fail your LPI? So if you fail the LPI, what could happen is if you're still in the beginning of your training, that training before you start your service, Peace Corps might just assign you a one-on-one tutor. So you might have tutoring after hours, after your language class, you stay after and you do tutoring. If it's really a significant delay, you're really not catching on like you're expected to, then you might get a one-on-one teacher. So all of your language training for PST will just be you with a language teacher, and they're really going to try and get you to catch up and teach you how you learn best.
So great that they are willing to help you if you're struggling, and they really do want you to make it. But this is pretty serious business because you're not going to be living in the first world and you need to be able to look after yourself in risky situations. And the first tool any of us always has is, of course, language. So let's say there's an emergency. What happens if you're evacuated and you can't continue?
So if you are medically evacuated, medically separated, administratively separated, if you have an early termination, any of these, you are still entitled to have your language proficiency interview, which will be accredited by the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages, which you can still put on your resume.
Fantastic to hear that. Sounds pretty fair to me. What do you think? But of course, if you don't improve on your language level, things are not going to go your way. You'll either be asked to leave, which means you won't even get to swear in as a volunteer, or if you're just under the required level, they might offer you some extra tutoring and support for the early days. But overall, you really need to want this.
Another thing that might happen is if you're still not passing your LPI and it's time to go to site and they're worried about your safety or your ability to survive at your site without the language that you need, they might just hold you back at the training center for a little while. This does happen. It happened when I was in the Peace Corps. Not a big deal. What they'll do is they'll keep some volunteers back at the training center. They will keep training you just on language every day. They're going to be long days of language class. You're going to have a lot of practice. There might be just you, it might be a couple volunteers, and you're really going to learn a lot of language in that week.
And sometimes Peace Corps will even pay someone at your site to tutor you, and this can be really helpful for picking up a specific dialect from your town. I mean, I would do this anyway just to get the dialect. Imagine all the stories you could listen to from the kids and the grannies and the interesting people around. That's the absolute best part of living in any kind of foreign community. I really love it, and stories are, of course, my thing, and this whole channel is full of stories about language learning, but stories don't just stop there on the ground, because here at StoryLearning we actually teach languages through stories too, because stories are the best way to learn any language. It's how we've learned our first languages. It's how we teach languages. If you'd like to learn more about this, I've put together a completely free story learning kit that shows you how to learn languages using the amazing power of story. So if you're curious, check out the link below in the description and claim your free story learning kit.
So one of the misconceptions is that you will be with your entire cohort during training. This is actually not true. We actually have different training towns. So if you are in a different level from someone, those different level groups will be in different training towns.
I found a sample training schedule to show you, but remember, it won't be the same schedule in every country. Another big part of the training is a homestay, aka immersion. My favorite thing of all.
So at the beginning of each volunteer service, they're going to be paired with a local counterpart, and that's who they're going to be working with to help train for the next 2 years of their service.
So we start with just these very, very basic classes when we first arrive, and then we're sent off to our host villages for the summer, for 10 weeks. And when we arrive to those families, we maybe know 10, 20 words of Romanian at most. And knowing the word does not mean you know how to use the word. So it's very scary when you're dropped off with the first host family. And for me, I was just like gesturing and trying to use what I knew.
Yeah, so what happens next is intensive language and job training for 10 to 12 weeks. And the language lessons happen with a mix of classroom, field-based learning and self-directed language learning.
This is a Thai dictionary that they gave us. And I know I brought one from the States, but I'm going to use both of them because this one's more of a dictionary and the other one's more of a phrase book. This is our Learning Thai language book. It's a bunch of exercises and we work on it every day.
So you get your dictionary, your books, everything you need for the next 27 months. Get ready to live, work and breathe in a new language. It is pretty intense. You are the stranger in town and you need to build trust, but you can't do that if they can't understand you. Sounds to me like your new language needs to become your new best friend, your soulmate, your everything.
So your first 3 months of service is training. So they stage this at this little compound in the city of Kokata, which is outside the capital, one of the other major cities there. And it's kind of like where they hold your hand and get you ready for everything that's going to happen. So first thing, we pretty much instantly moved into our host family's house. So they put each of us with a host family all around the city. So my host family was amazing and I loved my time staying with them. And my mom, she still calls me all the time. And I had 7 little brothers and sisters. So I had Jesse and Naomi and Blessing and Comfort and Martha Lynn, Josephine and Augustine.
What an amazing way to feel part of things. So how do the lessons actually work? Well, first you will get language classes Monday to Friday and lots of hands-on practice such as activities with the local community. Class sizes are small, 3 to 6 students, and groups are assigned by language level. You'll also learn strategies to help you with your own language learning journey. Your aim? To be allowed to swear in as a volunteer. Sounds like the swearing in ceremony. It really is the ultimate reward here. Go big or go home. It is no walk in the park, and the minimum language proficiency benchmark is all about how well you can speak. So who actually teaches these language classes? Let's see what Andrea says.
Now, who teaches these language classes? So they're all Nicaraguans, and they work for Peace Corps in order to linguistically prepare you for your service.
And finally, after 12 weeks, the big day.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge. My duties. In the Peace Corps. So help me God. Congratulations.
Happened during week 11, and essentially that is the first time that you go solo to your site, and you are not with staff. You travel all by yourself to your site, and you spend a week there with your host family to be, and you meet all of the teachers that you're going to be working with.
This is it, guys. Finally, the start of your service, the real deal, your 2-year full immersion. You're going to soon be leading projects that will change lives forever. Living with a host family, learning how they communicate, and working locally. It pretty much sounds like heaven to me.
And for health educators, we also have to prep our lesson plans in Romanian, and we teach in Romanian. We do not teach in English. Some of us may have partners that speak English, but for the most part, our day is fully in Romanian while we're in our site and working with other Moldovans. Because when you're, going straight to school and expected to speak and interact with kids in another language, it's something that you really need to feel comfortable with on, at least on a certain level.
I learned French during training. You do 3 months of training before going to your site to be a volunteer. In the 3 months of training, I was able to get to a level of proficiency where they were okay with me going and living by myself in this community. It was hard at first. Being in a new place, speaking a new language, and feeling that I couldn't communicate. So I was a lot of times just alone in my own head. But slowly I became more and more confident in speaking French, and then also at the same time started making friends in Burkina Faso.
Our textbooks were really bad and ineffective, so we didn't use them all that much. Instead, before every class, we would create these one-page worksheets. And so the worksheet would give a summary of the lesson that we had gone over for the day, all of the vocabulary that we had done, and also a homework worksheet at the bottom. And we would translate the whole thing into Russian and Kyrgyz. And so when the kids were taking these home every day, what we found out was that their parents were doing these worksheets with them. And so it wasn't just the kids who were learning English, the parents were using these worksheets to learn English themselves.
What makes this even more amazing is the fantastic skills that the local counterpart also learns from the volunteer. Because after 2 years, you're leaving them with English language skills that they can keep using to teach their own communities. It's absolute gold. When you have to leave, it must feel like your soul is torn in two.
Do večnost, like you're the end, you're the coolest.
I also, my sister taught me Gigi, like it's like I have it and you don't, na Gigi.
Jogir, Bavons.
Go up so Emajan, and she goes up so Somijan, and every Armenian thinks that's hilarious, so they start laughing.
Aminor menk, kofih mumenk, mikic bambasu menk, bites. Lava, che? It's shad sirumem aiskianke.
E hilaharang anangana vinava keyao, hongi kurna vulawi rara, lendru vi maliwai kekoyao, ngaina visumona kurundal taravakeyao.
In the end, volunteers will get the final language test. It's the same test they did before, except this time they're expected to get much better results. I mean, it has been long enough. Well, a person can get pretty fluent in a language in 2 years. And if you have adventure in your bones and you want to do something great with a new language, well, I've got just the video for you right here.